This is Vintage Country. Join us for a trip back to yesterday. On the farm, on the road, and in the barn. Relax and listen as we take you back. The following is a production of the RFD Radio Network.
This is Vintage Country. I'm Jim Taylor. It's more than just a hobby. It's a way of life for Rick Collins from Knox County and his work with the company Firmitas, restoring and preserving old barns. So I guess we'll begin this conversation this way. Rick Collins, when did your interest begin in providing this tender, loving care to these old barns across the country?
Well, I think professionally it happened in the mid-90s for me. And I think it stems really from the ag crisis of the 80s. And I feel like what I saw happening in the 80s with farms that were being foreclosed and so forth, and sort of having these images of farms being burned for fire department practice must have really etched something into my brain, because by the time I got to the 90s and I had finished my time in the Marine Corps and I'd graduated from the University of Illinois with a degree in forest science, and I was launching my carpentry career in 1995 or 96, I think I started to think about these images I had in my mind. And I just felt this really, really strong pull to preserve, what we call our built heritage. And so barns are part of that, as are downtown buildings and churches and other buildings that we work on throughout the Midwest. But I recognized it in the 90s, and I really feel like it came from just watching the drama of the ag crisis unfold in the 80s.
Your resume includes working on, let's just specifically talk barns. So
Yeah.
Do you think, how many barns have you worked on over the years?
Well, we generally interact with a couple hundred barns a year. And I think that since this company began about 30 years ago, I bet we've interacted with 10,000 buildings. And by interact, what I mean is that we do everything from just a site visit to sort of an assessment or an analysis of the building, all the way up to full-on restoration. So there's some weeks where I might encounter 5 or 6 or 7 historic buildings in the state of Illinois or Eastern Iowa or Western Indiana, all in the same week.
I'm assuming then all sizes, right? Do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure, all sizes. I think we're working on a barn in Naperville right now, and that little building is a carriage house, and it's probably 22 by 26. We also work on a lot of log buildings, which are traditional here, and they go down to 12 by 16. And then, we've worked on probably the largest 20-sided clear span building in the entire world, which is right here in Illinois. And that's the Chautauqua building in Shelbyville. So very, very large buildings. We're also working on a granary in Millstadt, Illinois, which is in excess of 150,000 square feet. So the timber buildings that we work on can get to be quite large.
And do you love kind of the storytelling aspect when you get to a location and finding out about, what that property means to those people in that area, whether it be a family or whether it be a community interest, I guess?
I love talking about it. I love learning. I have been very interested in history since I was very young, and being, someone who grew up here in Western Illinois, I felt a strong attachment to the land, and I grew up milking cows and baling hay, and I had a strong attachment to agriculture. And that shifted, also, what got added to that was my interest in our built heritage and our small rural communities, and trying to help people save these buildings. So I love the history. I love delving into it. I love learning about it. And more than anything, too, I just love sharing it. I love sharing the history. And I like walking into a community and looking at their barn or their old log cabin or another important building. Sometimes it's a fairground building.
And even work on covered bridges. Rick Collins from the company Firmitas in Western Illinois. This is Vintage Country. I'm Jim Taylor.
Thanks for joining us for Vintage Country. If you have a tractor, car, truck, or barn that should be in the spotlight, email us at radio@ilfb.org. Join us next week as we rewind and relax on Vintage Country.